Hello, we're back.
Happy International Women's Day.
What? Well, it was a couple days late, per usual.
My feed said it was
I
today,
think
March
it's the
8th.
5th.
No,
It's
today. Today, yo, I'm popping and we're ready to get live with y'all today.
I was wrong.
Woo!
Wow, that doesn't happen often, folks.
International Women's Day. Brother is trying to stay on point.
You were witness to it. So, and we have it
At
in
least
perpetuity.
today.
At least today, I was wrong. Yeah, that's gotta feel good. I'm not wrong
Always
often.
does. Always does.
So, what we thought we would bring you today, very topical. So, I don't know if those of you that stayed up here on not stayed up, it was at 8 o'clock. We got up early.
Lisa's telling on our daily habits. Early to bed.
Early to rise. We've been up early.
Yeah.
Anyway, Meghan and Harry, the Prince and Duchess, spoke, although they've been stripped of their titles. So Meghan and Harry spoke to Oprah last night, the queen of all queens. And they spoke obviously earlier, but it was aired last night. And a lot of stuff, people are like, well, why should I care about Meghan and Harry? Okay, that's a good question. That is a very good question. I'm going to say Meghan and Harry, actually, we have something in common with Meghan and Harry, right? So they are a mixed race couple or a multicultural couple.
They are that. And not only that, they're, from across the pond from each other. And then Meghan's all the way on the West Coast. So think about all the cultural and value-laden differences that they're navigating to be a couple.
That's right. And from two different, she was an actress, raised in LA.
The royals are actors too.
Let's
be
that's
real.
True. That's true. They do play a part, and so they can't acknowledge that. But and he, for those of you living under a rock, obviously this is the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle interview that showed that Oprah did last night. That was shown on ABC. Excuse me. And the reason that we're bringing it up, not just because I'm a little bit of a Diana-phile, but that's actually not at all the reason we're bringing it up. Sorry.
Lovely, beautiful woman, humanitarian, and a very sad end of her life. And I can absolutely journey with Lisa down that path. What the royals do, or what's the show that everyone's watching?
The Crown.
The Crown. What's happening there? Or Downington Abbey.
Downton Abbey. So yeah. Okay, so that's not why we're digressing a little bit. That's not why we're doing this show today. No. It's because they talked about some serious issues. Harry talked about Meghan talked about being suicidal while she was pregnant. And reaching out for help and nobody giving it to her. And then Harry talked about being ashamed that she was suicidal and not knowing how to talk to his family about it.
That's really big because so many women within the postpartum aspects of life or during that period will have depressed tendencies or the state of life isn't the best of their journey and they need help and men are often not good gauges.
Well, this was when she was still pregnant. She hadn't had the baby yet. So this was so she was going through a lot before. But so that was part of it, right? And the stigma with speaking out and speaking about your mental health and she said that she didn't want to live anymore. I mean, she didn't want to be left home alone.
What princess says that? And yet, there it is, right?
Right.
And then Harry reveals that he actually was probably not prepared for all the cultural, racial, white supremacist, you name it, there's a litany of things going on that he didn't know and he maybe had assumptions about. I can't get into his mind, but the way she reveals the story to us, it seems like there are more things that couples, particularly couples from mixed backgrounds or different cultural contexts need to really unpack, need to like check into.
Yeah, and preemptively unpack, right? Before it gets to the point of the tabloids are at you and other things are
Are they
going
coming
on.
for us, Lisa?
I don't know, maybe. Um, but so she really was dealing with a lot. I mean, they showed the different headlines between she and Kate, right? Will's wife, the future king's wife, and hers were all, oh, Kate's eating healthy for her baby, eating avocados for her baby. And that was a healthy, a good story. And then Meghan Markle was eating avocados and, oh, well, this is terrible. There's too much water. It's not a sustainable fruit. And how dare she eat this? It's an oppressed blah. I mean, it was insane, literally insane. So she's watching and she's actually not paying that close attention, but it's still filtering into her. And Harry did say, he said, and we're going to pivot from them in a moment, just to set it up for you. Harry did say, I had no idea. I had no idea and he said, until I was walking in her shoes, I didn't know. He said, the royal family doesn't know. The institution, which is what they call the monarchy, because it's clearly not just the royal family, it's the people that are the spin doctors and everybody else. But he also said, and this was one of the things that really stuck with me, 72 members of parliament came out in support of Meghan. And he said, not one person in my family did. And that to me was sad.
I want to dovetail with that because the reality is most of us as men don't know what women experience. And I'm saying most of us. There may be a few of you out there that are just amazing beyond belief, but it certainly isn't the average guy. I'm going to be also equally fair. I don't think most women understand fully what men are dealing with or contending with, although women may have a better understanding because they've nurtured male children and have watched this thing evolve, so they probably have a better understanding. But then across these racial, cultural, ethnic, religious, kind of all the different things that can separate us and put us in our own unique boxes, we all make a lot of assumptions. And when love is involved and you want to have a sustainable relationship, I think you better unpack these things one by one by one.
Yeah, if you want a long term, right? Obviously, they were getting married. And so I think that it's sort of a tale of caution. Really good. And that's what we're going to pivot into. We're not going to stay with Meghan and Harry. For those of you that are annoyed by that, I apologize. And yet, I think it's a really, sorry, honey. It's a really good example because they have a platform. It's an amplification. It's an opportunity for all of us to pay attention, right? To look, pay attention and say, okay, let's get real about this shit, right? Excuse my language, but let's get real about this. Let's talk to, and I actually want to reach out to Harry now because I want to put him in touch with Aware LA. I feel like the poor guy is now been exposed to this and he's completely alone. He doesn't have his family anymore. They have a few friends, but that's how it felt to me. But he's just
Mr. Prince has had the best of everything. Losing your mother young, there's no words for that. But beyond that, yes. But here's the real deal. Anybody and everybody who's in need of more compassion, in need of more empathy, in need of, dare I say, friendship, needs to reach out and needs to know who they can turn to. So you're not wrong.
No, and as a woman of Northern European descent, okay, aka white, in this relationship, I know how important it is to have those allies, to have those anti-racist other Northern or European Americans that are sort of like-minded, that are paying attention, that are doing that work. And it's such a small, it's such a tiny, tiny number. And
It's
so I'm
growing.
trying, it
It's
is
growing,
growing.
to be fair.
It is growing, and it is growing, and yeah, it is growing. So, but one of the things we wanted to talk to you guys about, so preemptively discussing race, right? How do you preemptively discuss racism if you are in a relationship that's going to get serious? I mean, you know pretty quickly, or when you know, you know. So by the time you know.
Beyond the booty call, right? Beyond those
Yeah.
natural urges that occur because you find the person attractive, and you're ready to meet their friends, ready to meet their family, ready to introduce them to your peeps,
Yeah.
and you know this relationship is going somewhere. You've got to be able to deep dive into things that might be difficult. And you say, oh, that's not a sexy subject. That's not where I want to go with this nice dinner date. But you better do it, because whether it's about race, racism, prejudice, likes, dislikes, whatever the subject matter as it pertains to relationships across
Yeah.
age or race, class, and creed, you've got to deal with the subjects so that you can give yourself the best chance.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with them, eventually they're going to show up, because living in America.
Well, and so many people talked about how the summer of 2020 impacted their relationships, right? Because of the George Floyds and the Breonna Taylors. Now, for many BIPOC, that wasn't a shock, but for so many white folks, it was like, oh my gosh, this actually is happening, and everybody was paying attention. And so then you have a disconnect, right? You have a difference in understanding of what's going on in the world.
It may not even be just a disconnect. It may play itself out as annoyance, because there's not a moment in my life that I don't remember some black kid, some black woman, somebody of color, Latina, Latino, somebody Asian, somebody suffering under the hands of a dominating culture that doesn't think your inherent worth and dignity is there. In fact, you don't matter, and they will use and abuse you and serve you up. So I'm glad that my wife and my friend, my most special person. No, where am I going with this? I'm glad you were aware. But the reality is, I've met very few people of European extraction that actually has been aware of the socio-political, theological, psychological, sociological, anthropological realities of this divide between the races, between the cultures. And so we need to deal with these things. The time is now.
So how do you do that, right? So right. And how do you make sure that as the European American, aka white person in this relationship with your BIPOC partner, how do you make sure that the things you're doing are actually impactful and you're not just speaking the words Black Lives Matter and just virtue signaling? I don't know if you guys, so virtue signaling is when you try and say or put up a sign and you're trying to show somebody what your value, what your virtue is, right? Like, this is, I believe this. Okay, but what are you doing about it? And I think that that's where the bottom line is. Right now, it's where the rubber hits the road. And since the summer of 2020, white folks have been asked over and over and over again, well, what are you going to do about it? I don't care that you're hanging a shingle that says Black Lives Matter, and I get it now. What now? And so that's part of what we want to talk to you guys. So what now? Share your value system. Have an open discussion with one another before it gets serious. Go get a glass of wine if you're a drink. If you want to smoke a joint, that's fine. Like, do what you do. Take a long walk. Get on the elliptical and have these conversations while you're playing basketball. I don't know. There's a million different ways to have them.
How about the many ways Lisa's constantly been showing me that she's aware by offering television programming, movies, articles, TED Talks from various and sundry performers that are woke people, that are people that are trying to push the agenda of inclusivity and equality and justice for all. What's that saying you always have at the bottom of your emails? What is that, babe?
None of us are free until all of us are free.
And Lisa, I believe, has been trying to live that long before she met me. So that's the wonder of Lisa, but the wonder of whomever you're in love with, or whomever you're in like with, or whomever is your sexy, this could go further person. Do things that will show them without it being a stress test, right? We can expose each other to cultural and philosophical points of view that matter to us without it becoming full out war, right? And you don't want to let it go to that warfare. You want it to stay in a place where you're this person that I'm really into, and I want to show you what's important to me and why it's important to me. And don't be afraid, because if the person cares about you, they're going to listen. They're going to pay attention.
And that's the other thing. So what Gordon just shared with you about some of the things that I've done or do on a regular basis. It's not just that I listen, or that I show them, or I put them on the television, or I share them. It's that I read them. I let them inculcate into my sort of my being, my consciousness, and I consider my part in what they're saying. I consider how to be. I'm doing this workshop that's called Transforming White Organizational Culture. And one of the questions that they were asking was, name, what is what is white? What does white mean? What is white America? What does being an American mean? And then that actually wasn't what I wanted to say, but that's an interesting, so that's one of the things I'm doing currently, is I'm looking into that and examining that through the lens of our UU congregation here in Las Vegas. Sort of how does that all transpose into that? But also we're doing with my book group that just did some, we just read the Layla Sahad book, Me and White Supremacy, and we took a long time to do it, and we did a lot of deep diving on it. And it was a couple of my best friends, some family, other friends from other areas, and one of my friends was from Theater of the Oppressed, and they are doing an exercise with us next week to get us continue to get us out of our sort of white brain, right? To continue to get us out of our cultural stands and open up a little bit more. And one of the questions they asked was, think about a time that you haven't stood up, that you haven't been your best ancestor, the best ancestor you could have been. And honestly, I had to really, and I'm pretty good at my self-awareness. I try and that's one of the things I try and have with regards to this. I believe Gordon will say I'm not always self-aware. Like there's a stain on a carpet that I did. But with regards to this stuff, with regards to racism and anti-racism and dismantling my own white supremacy, I had to go back about 12 years. 12 maybe, yeah, about 12 years before, 12, 13 years before I found an episode that I could use that really, and I thought back and I thought, wow, I actually do speak up. I do advocate. I do try and pull in and amplify voices as best as I can. There's certain times that I obviously haven't done enough. And as I give, the Maya Angelou quote.
I mean, but the thing is, at the end of the day, what is enough? When will all of us be free? When will we stop placing each other in a box and saying, oh, that's a Caucasian, that's a Negro, etc., etc., etc. I'm not looking for a world where we don't notice the differences in one another. Yeah. I celebrate our differences. I'm so glad that we are like this beautiful mosaic or flowers in a field with all the amazing wildflowers that might sprout in a beautiful meadow. Thank goodness for the differences and the beauty that's seen in a multiplicity of ways. But what I'd like people to do, and particularly those who would dare to love across these lines, across culture, across racial, across, the boxes that human beings make, to if you weren't aware before you got into the relationship, give the relationship the best possible opportunity to grow by starting to build your literacy around the issues, by reading. I don't know how many white Americans ever read a black newspaper. Well, newspapers are dying, but I'm from that generation, right? We
Or
used
a
to
blog.
or a blog, right?
Blog now. Yeah.
Or from an Asian perspective, or from, and as if Asians are monolithic people, right? Because these things don't cover everybody, right? We do these broad strokes, but you have to know. So here's what's complicated for me, as a African American, a black person, a Jamaican, because I always figure whatever your mother is, if you're raised by your mother or whoever the woman is typically that rears you, you're going to have more of the cultural connections to their origin story, right? So my mother's born in Harlem to Jamaican immigrants, Jamaican American, but I always felt like a Jamaican. The issue that becomes difficult is if you're dating someone and there's that sexiness because they're from a different thing, or like say I was into the fabulous cobalt blue eyes or blonde hair, and she was like, oh, that brother got some back, like I had some strong legs and some booty or some whatever it is that turns you on. That's not me. All the white blood went into my backside. Anyway, the reality is, get to know where they're coming from. Lisa just made some gumbo. It was vegetarian gumbo.
No, it was seafood.
It was a seafood gumbo. But oh my God, I was so happy. I was doing a happy dance. Not only does Lisa love the Caribbean and things of West Indian cultural context, Jamaican context, jerk, she's big on jerk and curry and things. We listen to Bob Marley radio, they said Tough Gun radio every day or so. But she loved New Orleans, and she loved the culture of Southern Louisiana, and she's immersed herself in things. So the red beans and rice, the jambalaya, the gumbo, the things happen. It's the music, it's Trombone Shorty, it's Louis Armstrong. But so Lisa's done that, and here's my point: as an African American, though, I've already known so much about whiteness, white culture, except I was never privy to the inside conversations that European Americans, the nicer way of putting it, that European Americans were having. Some of my relatives worked in the homes of white folks, overheard them. They could then come back and parrot what was being said in those white spaces. But in this modern era where very few, maybe African Americans or black folks or even Latinos are in those private spaces where white folks talk about things, the way they shape their children, the cultural normative values that are espoused by families. I don't know that, and I need to know that. If we're going to build an everlasting love, right? If a union is to be strong, that can't be ripped apart and torn asunder by the forces in this society, you got to know each other and dare I say, even have compassion for one another. Because sometimes I'm an angry black man, and for those of you who don't know me, I know this is the way I present myself. Oh, what a loving, peaceful soul. But I'm like a volcano sometimes. Boom, I can erupt, and it can be from a multiplicity of microaggressions and a few massive aggressions that have happened to me, and then all of a sudden something triggers it, and I'm back in that space saying, "Oh my God, here we go again."
Can I say something about that?
You
I'm
sure
not about
can.
your stuff, but
Yeah,
but
sure.
as the person with this complexion in a relationship, it's really important that you pay attention to those things because and honestly, the more you have honest and open discussions about this, the better it is for everybody, including you. And the truth is you, meaning this person. There are certain things that and right when you first begin this journey, you're going to want to go to your BIPOC partner and go, "Oh my God, did you see? And what if? And what if?" Da, 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 da." Don't do that. Don't do that. Click on an individual white person like me or somebody else talking about this stuff. Pick up a book and read it. Listen to a podcast. Don't burden your BIPOC partner.
Find a surge chapter.
Find a surge chapter, right? So, but here's what I will also say. So there are certain things, I think we talked a little bit about this with the Judas and the Messiah, but there are certain things, like things that I'm discovering that Gordon's known for 50 something years, right? And I've been doing this work for 30 years, but he's been a black man for 59, right? So those kinds of things, those discoveries or aha moments or things that really do lead to further and deeper connection. And feel free to share that. Share, oh, I had an aha moment. I would love to share it with you if you're open, but pay attention. Pay attention. He used a word called the trigger word, right? Trigger. And for those of you that don't know, there's so many different triggers. There are people that have been sexually abused that can't watch movies with, I mean, they're and this combination here, I'm telling you, there are triggers for me as a woman. There are triggers for me as a woman that came up this week. I don't want to be told to be pleasant and to not, right? I don't want that. I don't want you to tell me that. I don't want you as a male to tell me that. So as a female and female identifying, right? I am a cisgendered female, which means I was born a woman and I still identify as a woman, but there are many in our culture, in our world, that are female identifying that are not cisgendered. So I would also bring them, and that's a whole different topic. I mean, we don't have time to talk about that, but I'm bringing it up just because there are different, just to have that compassion, try and understand whatever you are going through, your triggers, they're going to be different for your partner. BIPOC partner. And here's the reason I'm saying I want to talk a little bit about, and I had written this down, about wanting to speak about your assumptions before it becomes, and your sort of prejudices as best as you can, right? Let's talk about some value systems before it becomes the George Floyd moment, before you're watching together and you're reacting differently than your BIPOC. Maybe you're both horrified, but BIPOC, maybe Gordon he's not going to watch that video. Why would he want to watch that video?
Sometimes the videos or the documentaries or the movies take me back to a time when I was enraged by the larger society. And so here I am with my lovely trying to have a good evening, and she's being culturally competent by deep diving into things, but inside it's causing me distress, right? So we have to figure out ways of viewing things that aren't misogynistic or paternalistic or race infused. Sometimes it matters to watch those things together and unpack it. And then sometimes, if we're looking to have just a nice evening and maybe, oh, we're going to have a sexy good night, that might be the worst possible thing to show somebody, because it could make them tight. It can make them feel badly. And I want to circle back to something, because I know our time is limited and we've been chatty today. You know, we started off with Harry and Meghan, and I kind of joked off the fact that he's this uberly privileged soul, and yet I have a lot of compassion for him. the loss of his mother, the strange relationship with the father and the whole royal family, the lack of real knowledge. He didn't have a Benson or some black nanny that worked with him as a child
That's
and gave him
true.
insights into black life.
It's
I've
true.
known white folks in America that have had black staff or neighbor that like
Wow.
fed them, as they could swallow it, information
It's true.
about living within a multicultural society. So when he falls in love with Meghan, I'm imagining he doesn't have a clue at
No.
how difficult, how much more knowledge he needs to ingest so he can be a good father to these children they're producing, and he can be a good partner, a good husband to Meghan. And these things matter in such a huge way. The divorce rate or the breakup rate is way too high. So if you're starting in a relationship, if you're in one that's across culture, across race, across all those divides, find a way to learn about each other, find a way to learn about the culture, find a way to learn about the family of origin story, because we all have a book that needs to be revealed. And if a relationship's really gonna work, like deeply and like be like the greatest romance, right? If it's gonna work, y'all got to do the work.
And my closing thought is this: not just as the non-BIPOC in a partnership like this, don't just watch the civil rights movies and don't just look at the issues and the violence and the upset that has been. That's really important for you to
What was that movie
see.
you just showed me? That was
Sylvie's
so good.
Love. Sylvie's
Oh,
Love. It was
oh,
amazing.
I cried.
Amazon,
I cried. I was so
Prime.
happy.
It's beautiful. But really reach into the joy of the multicultural, right? The joy that's over here in what I mean. The Bob Marleys. We listen to, and he's right. The New Orleans and the gumbo. I mean, that's pure joy for me. I love New Orleans. He's right. It was amazing. So really lean into that joy and ask. So if you as this person, I'm talking to you now, as this person, you do your own deep dive into the negative, the sad, the upsetting, the violent stories, because you need to know. But as when you're going to share with each other, look for the joy, look for the joyous moments, so that it doesn't feel like you're trying to, that you're going to harm or trigger. Yeah.
Please share the
Yeah.
love. Share the love. It's a mixed bag, right? The
It is.
beautiful and the dismaying and everything in between.
Because the other stuff's going to come. It's going to come. You don't have to go looking for it. And yet, it's important to have those conversations before it does come. So I know we're saying a couple of different things, but really have the conversations. Make sure you're discussing them. Make sure you're educating yourself. Look for other white anti-racist folks. My friend Chris Crass, look for videos he does. He's amazing. He's an anti-racist, feminist educator, does a lot of great stuff. Serge,
If you're the person of color in the relationship and you're living in Whiteville, because there's a bunch of us that move into spaces where there aren't that many people of color, right? Find an online discussion group. Find a mentoring group. Find some brothers or Latinos or Asians or Native Americans, whoever you are, BIPOC people. Find somebody that you can share with, because sometimes it gets lonely. And as much as you love somebody, you can feel like you're out in the field alone.
and hang out with other mixed couples if you can. That's just
Find
that's,
us. Find us. And we'll do some Zoom.
We sound
We'll do
thirsty.
some Zoom.
We sound a little thirsty for friends. We're okay. We're okay. But yes, and so next week we're actually going to talk about something really troubling. So, and we're gonna dive into a little deeper discussion about it. We're not gonna stay there the whole time, but we're gonna talk about the differences in how white and BIPOC people view the police.
Woo, stay tuned for that one,
Stay
because
tuned.
it won't disappoint. I'm going to bring it.
Yeah, it's gonna be rough. So we got another week, but we're gonna talk about that. And Gordon's gonna do his own thing. Thanks again. Please hit that subscribe button on the bottom. Super
Tell a
important.
friend. You know somebody in a mixed relationship.
Share.
Check it out.
Widely
Share
share.
us. Look, we're trying
not
to
shy.
build something
We're
here.
not shy. We're building. All right. Mwah.
Take care. Be
Ciao.
safe. Bye.